Okay, I picked up some of these Rectilinear 3 LOWBOY speakers. They were made from 1969 to 1971, something like that. They weren't made for very long. I know they had a lot of engineers supposedly that were involved with the, I guess, development of these. And there were a lot of changes. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting information on these. But like I said, I do have the LOWBOY version. When I got them, they had, both of them had melted tweeter pots. Really interesting because the two pots on them, one of them looks different than the other. So I was like, okay, is this an L pad or is this a pot? They're both pots. They're not L pads. So the other thing was I did find a shorted capacitor. These capacitors are only rated at like 25 volts. So that's probably has something to do with why both of the tweeter pots were just like burnt and melted. But anyway, yeah, they have some issues. If you're looking at this video, you probably have some idea what these are because they're super obscure vintage. They're a little too old to be like considered like super classic speakers. A lot of people aren't really looking for these unless you're really into the pre-1975 stuff. These are massive speakers. They've got one 12-inch bass woofer, one 5-inch whizzer mid-range, like a dual cone mid-range driver, two tweeters that are 2.5-inch, and two super tweeters that are also 2.5-inch. I didn't know that they were super tweeters. I'm looking at the Hi-Fi Engine deal here, the page right here, talking about the specs. And it is a vented bass reflex, so it does have a port in it. And I guess brand new in 1971, they were $279. So I saw some old advertisements about concerning these, and they were $279 back in the early 70s and late 60s. They were priced more expensive than the JBL L100s, which are probably one of the most legendary vintage speakers ever made. I've never heard L100s, so I don't know if they're any better, but I do have some things to say about them. Like I said, when I got them, they were electronically, they were pretty trash. They had the original Temple capacitors. There's only two, 25 volt. That's not enough voltage for modern amps, so I'm assuming that's probably why they got real hot. The pots got real hot. I changed out the pots. I changed them to these ones I found on Amazon. And these are the ones. I'm going to show a picture of that. They're 2 watts, and they work just fine. They work amazing. They're 100 ohms, though. The stock ones are supposedly 32 ohm, and these ones off of Amazon are 100 ohm. So when you crank it all the way to the left, it cuts out more signal, which I don't know why you'd want to cut signal on this anyway. They really sound the best with them all wide open, like all the way to the right. If you have them in the middle, they sound, or I'm guessing it wasn't as bad with the 32 ohms, but they're kind of muffled if you have them anything but all the way maxed out. I would personally delete these in this design, but they were, for some reason, they thought that was a good idea. And they have two Sandcast 8 ohm resistors. One of them is a 5 watt and the other is a 10 watt. The 10 watts were slightly out of spec, so I replaced them. The 5 watts were in spec, so I left them in. The speakers both measured 7.6 exactly when I was done. And yeah, they sound really good. Something that I forgot to mention, and that is what capacitors I ended up going with. I went with Dayton Audio stuff, 250 volt variants of the same capacitance. Here are the part numbers. A lot different than what I'm used to listening to. Like I said, they're massive, and that probably contributes to the way they sound. And all the notes I made were with the grills on. So the first thing I want to start off with is that they have really full warm bass. The thing with these is they have tons of bass, tons of low end, really good imaging. The imaging was actually decent, wide. It wasn't like you're listening to, obviously it's not going to be like you're listening to little bookshelf speakers. It's lower, they're lower. I feel like they, you know, if you put them on top of something, it might be a little better, but I thought it was okay. I was sitting on my couch, I thought they sounded fine. The grills were on, so they were a little soft on the treble. The lack of detail wasn't overly apparent. But I think obviously if you take the grills off, it'll probably give a little bit more treble if you want to do that. I didn't really feel the need to do that. I thought they sounded fine. I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there that have experience with these. They enjoy them with the grills off. That's what I was reading on the forums. Modern music, I felt, sounded really good. The woofer keeps up surprisingly. It's very punchy, very tight bass, but there's a lot of it. There's a lot of resonance, but I like it. It's really good. It doesn't sound bad. A lot of these guys, they don't like the resonance in the cabinets, but I think it sounds amazing. I think it sounds so good because you get to hear like the cabinet and the different character of that box, the way that it was specifically tuned. I guess they call it the Q of the box. I'm not sure. I don't really know that too much about it, but I do know they sounded good. I feel like with the genres, country music was just I feel spectacular. I got that impression the very first time I listened to them. The country music just stood out, just the way the bass sounds and the detail on the guitar and stuff. Probably the best speakers I've ever heard for country music, to be honest with you. It's just everything that I was expecting to hear from the song that's made it sound country. It was like accentuated. It just sounded so good. The song I was running with, it's really like one of the songs I listen to all the time. It was 18 Wheels and a Dozen Roses, which there's several versions of that song. I like the Billy Dean version. Billy Dean has a version of it. Sounds absolutely incredible. It was just all around amazing to listen to on these. The original version, Matea, I think her name is Kathy Matea, I think that's her name. I was able to pick out details of this song that I wasn't able to pick out before. I've never heard stuff before because it was just the way that the cabinets are tuned, the way the speakers are made. They were accentuating certain frequencies, and I was able to pick out instruments and stuff that I didn't even know was there previously, which is interesting. For example, during the verses, I heard some ride, while she's singing on the original version of the song, 18 Wheels and a Dozen Roses. I was able to hear the ride, on the bell, the ride, I think that's what it's called. Or maybe it was a child. It was probably the ride. It was like I was able to pick that out. I was like, that's interesting. I never heard that before. Also, during the verses, piano was really apparent and sounded amazing. Chorus was just came out when the chorus came out. The verses are kind of quiet, and then when the chorus comes out, it's like explosive and loud. And this is exactly the impression that I got when I was listening to these speakers. I also wanted to bring up what amplifier I was running. It was a 1976 restored Marantz 4400. I've actually still got it. It's a friend of mine. It's obviously a 70s solid state receiver. And it really sounds like this type of music is what the speakers were designed for, was this type of music. At least that's the impression that I got. They would be really good for just throwing them in a small dance hall. And it would sound better than any PA speaker that I've ever heard, probably. Especially with the low end extension. I checked out some other older music like Elvis Presley. Sounded great. It really filled out the fullness of his lower register on his voice in a natural way. But I think they're really good speakers. But the chances of you finding ones that have been redone like these is probably pretty low. But if you can find them, they're not bad speakers. They're just huge, and they probably won't pass the wife acceptance factor, if that's a factor. Anyway, I have really nothing else to say about these other than that I thought they were pretty cool. Pretty cool speakers. If you've never heard about them, well, now you have.